So all this work we've been doing on Scrapyard Wars 3, which has started, by the way, definitely you want to check that out up there, it's awesome, has gotten me thinking about previous Scrapyard Wars that we did. In Scrapyard Wars 2, the highlight for me was constructing my own water block with the help of my neighbor who has a CNC. And I realized that while we did benchmark the actual cooling performance of my system, we never determined if it was cooled so poorly because of the copper coil that I was using to dissipate the heat, or because of the Neighbor Nader 5000 CPU water block. So today, I'm going to be doing a review of my own water block that I built, well, with a lot of help, in Scrapyard Wars 2. So come along for the ride. Let's find out just how practical building your own water block can be compared to a pre-done solution. The Logitech G303 features a lightweight design, an advanced optical sensor with Delta Zero technology for precise tracking, and RGB lighting. Check out the link in the video description to learn more. So I guess this is how reviews usually start, right? Is taking a look at the product. Now, if you watched Scrapyard Wars 2, you'll already know a lot about the construction of this block, but if you haven't, then I'll give you guys a quick rundown. It was cut on a custom-made CNC that my neighbor actually uses for his solar-powered scoreboards business that he runs out of his garage, and is constructed out of two pieces of metal. So there's an aluminum plate at the bottom. I had originally intended to use copper so that we wouldn't be mixing metals, but due to the ease of working with aluminum, we opted for aluminum. So there's an aluminum block on the bottom that actually has a cutout for some capacitors that would otherwise interfere with it, specifically on this motherboard. So these are a match made to go together. Then there's a copper plate on the top, and copper was chosen in this case because soldering on copper barb fittings was going to be a lot easier than tapping out threads for normal barbs. So yes, we're mixing metals. No, that's not recommended for the long term, even if you have an anti-corrosive additive, even though that will help quite a bit. But it was more about the temporary operation of the thing than anything else anyway. So on the inside, which I unfortunately can't show you, but we should have some footage to pop up here, there are actually fins or channels cut into the copper. Now, there's a lot of engineering that goes into the optimal thickness of the base plate compared to where the channels start, the optimal thickness of the fins themselves, and the direction of the water flow inside. We didn't do any of that. But what I want to know is how much that actually affects the end result. So for comparison, we are going to be using an EK Supremacy MX, the included water block in their Predator all-in-one liquid cooler. So we'll also be using the rest of the Predator, so that's a DDC Plus, I believe, pump, as well as a dual 120mm radiator and a couple Noctua NFF12 fans to get the best apples-to-apples comparison that we can on our Core i7 930 CPU. So without further ado, let's get this party started. Assembling the test bench was pretty straightforward. We're using a classic style bolt-through mounting system, then just a couple of thumb nuts over the top to hold it on tight. The only real key thing here is don't go too tight because you can actually crack or at least flex your motherboard, and also make sure you're using some kind of insulating cover on the heads of the screws that come up through the back of the board. We're not using any clamps on the hoses, not because I wouldn't recommend doing this in a permanent install, but just because we're only testing very temporarily on a test bench. One thing I didn't foresee is that I'm going to have to refill the EK Predator. Oops, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal because there is a fill port right up here on the top. Okay, hold on a second. We interrupt this compelling footage of me installing a water block to bring you this breaking update. This just arrived at the door and actually has some relevance to the project we're working on. Okay, this, my friends, is our first samples of the Linus Tech Tips Special Edition NFF12 and NFA14 fans from Noctua. Yes, my friends, they are here. All black plastic and orange accents. I'm going to install them on the radiator. They'll be available for purchase soon. I don't know exactly when. And we have retailers lined up in the United States, Australia, UK/Germany, and Canada. So yeah, gonna be awesome. So we got our water cooler installed, we got our block installed, we got our sexy new fans installed. All that's left is to boot this puppy up and make sure that we're able to get into Windows where we can do our comparative temperature testing. Okay, so we're back with some results, and I think it's fairly safe to say that the bottleneck was either my copper cooling coil or I had a bad mount last time, because this is not bad. I'm sitting anywhere from 29 to 33 degrees. Generally speaking, I take the second hottest core when I read via real temp, so we'll call it 30 degrees idle on the CPU. Not too shabby, but that doesn't really tell us anything about its performance when the going gets tough. So we're going to start up our IDA64 stress test and find out what happens to our CPU temps then. Now we have to give it about 10 to 15 minutes to reach equilibrium, and then we'll come back and report our load temperatures with our custom block. All right, so we've got our load temperatures. As usual, they're bouncing around a fair bit, but I think it's safe to say somewhere in the 55, let's call it 56 degree territory is going to be our load temperature. Not bad. That's actually going to be pretty challenging for our commercial block to beat by a significant margin. So let's go ahead and change out the block and see how it does. Installation of the second block was fairly straightforward. I just had to pop off my homemade one, swap the other block onto it, just using a bucket to catch some water that spilled. Then I had to go find a backplate, since out of the box this block is not compatible with LGA 1366. And from there I was able to use the stock thumb screws and bolts and screw into the backplate, and it was pretty much off to the races after topping up my radiator. Okay. So I think we're there. Idle temperatures, very close, but we expected that. When the chip's not kicking out a ton of heat, you can't really expect there to be a massive difference from one cooler to another. This is the case for water coolers, air coolers, whatever. So we're looking at about 29 degrees on our second hottest core for our chip. Now, let's turn up the heat and see how our commercial block compares to our DIY one. All right, so we've got our final results, and they're actually looking not too bad. We only managed to beat our homemade block by about 6 degrees with a commercial block. Now, with that said, the gap will continue to widen as the heat output of the processor rises. So as you overclock, the homemade block will lag behind significantly, not to mention that it's got a bunch of other problems as well. So overall, the conclusion of my review is this: A+ for effort, but it's ugly as sin, difficult to mount, it's going to corrode eventually, and when you factor in all the time that I spent building it, as much fun as that was, it's just not worth it compared to buying a commercial block. But that shouldn't surprise anyone, since the whole DIY CPU block thing has gone pretty much completely out of fashion over the last 5 to 8 years. So if you thought this project was cool, maybe check out Squarespace.com. It's a pretty cool website where you can build your own website at your own URL with your own content on it, whatever that happens to be, whether it's your, homemade water block building service, or a portfolio for some great photography work that you do, or a corporate website with just information about your staff like we have at LinusMediaGroup.com. The way it works is you sign up for Squarespace, which is free for the first 2 weeks, by the way. You get a free trial in there to make sure you like it. You build your website. It'll look great on mobile, desktop, or whatever else, because all of their templates feature responsive design, and you just kind of plop things in and move things around in their templates. They've got 24/7 tech support via live chat and email, and you build a beautiful website that's always working, because their plans start at only $8 a month, but they're scalable depending on what you need to do and what kind of traffic you need your site to be able to handle. So visit Squarespace.com, linked in the video description, and use offer code Linus to save 10% on your first purchase. So thanks for watching, guys. If you disliked this video, you know where that button is, but if you liked it, hit that like button, get subscribed, leave a comment below telling us what you thought of our little experiment here, and if you did enjoy it, then consider supporting us. You can buy a cool t-shirt like this one, change your Amazon bookmark to one with our affiliate code, instructions are up there, or what's that other thing? Right, you can join our community forum and give us a direct monthly contribution, get a cool little badge next to your name. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks again for watching, and if you're looking for something else to watch now, we did the freaking coolest project ever, even better than this one, where we took a single gaming tower and ran 2 copies of Star Wars Battlefront off of it at the same time. 2 gamers running discrete copies. Check that video out. We've got it linked up there. See you guys next time.